the Terra Firma studios, buddy.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, no, you got a nice setup. You got a nice setup.
Clearly, we can hear our studio audience here. Thank you, everybody, for making it out today.
For sure. Yeah, no, I love your setup, man. A lot of progress. Last time I had you on my podcast, yeah, I'm impressed.
Thanks, man. Well, I'm just a amateur trying to become a professional, so
Definitely.
getting it dialed in, and just having my colleagues, friends, just people I find interesting. Some former clients. You're the first one. Just want to have them on the show. Just really. So people ask me like Terra Firma, what's that, right? So
Yeah.
Comes from the Latin word terra firma, meaning solid ground. Kind of play on real estate, since I'm a real estate mortgage broker. You want to have a house that's built on solid ground, aka terra firma, right? And then for me, it's like we want to live our lives on solid ground. We want to have authentic conversation, talk about real issues, and so I kind of landed on Terra Firma with Sam Andress and friends.
Gotcha.
Toan, I bring you on the podcast. You're obviously a podcaster as well. You're a client, you're a friend. Just would love to hear a little bit for context for people. Toan bought his first home in Los Angeles. Was it over a year ago now?
Close to a year ago. Yeah. I
think a year ago.
Yeah, actually, yeah. March 31st would be a year.
Okay, so we're coming right up on a year.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Man, it's like a blink of an eye. Just kind of.
Yeah, it went by fast for sure.
So I can tell people all about the home process. From my experiences, homeowner, property owner, of course, as a realtor and a broker. But I'd love to just hear a little bit from you on how did your journey start, and your process of like, hey, I need to buy a home in LA. How did it start? What did it look like? And then maybe pick up where we met and how that experience was in the way that I was able to serve you and kind of make it happen for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to toot my own horn, but
For sure. I think so. I'm a California native. Obviously, I'm not from LA. I'm a transplant, but from San Francisco Bay Area. That's where I was, pretty much born and raised. But I think the pressure of like living in California, the American dream is really to get situated, just like your podcast name, right? Terra Firma, is to have solid ground, which is to buy a house. And
the American dream, right? I mean,
absolutely, it is the dream. Because growing up in California, if you were in the 90s, I grew up in the 80s and the 90s. Home prices were, that's where it was the trigger moment, where it's just like it just kept going up and up and up and up. And then obviously you have different cycles, but a house, especially if you have children, like growing up, that can make or break, their future, right?
100%.
So it's like me growing up in California, my parents, they came from Vietnam. So it's like that was out of reach for them.
Were you born in Vietnam?
No, I'm born and raised in the United States.
Gotcha. Okay.
But my parents, they came from Vietnam, and it's like the people, the community, especially underserved communities, that's out of reach. But the thing is, it's not saying that we don't. People are, can recognize it, right? They can recognize the haves and the have-nots. But in terms of like, my search has always been on. It has always been on, seeing where the soft markets are, seeing where the most expensive markets are. Where can I go in California to be able to live the American dream, to have that stability, to set myself up for the future. And in the Bay Area, it's just exorbitant. The home prices are very, very expensive. Yeah. So it's like the average home for, in the Bay Area is like $1.25 million. And
not far off in LA though.
Not far off, but still, that can still make a pretty good dent.
For sure. No, for sure. So you always had it, maybe from since you were a young boy, that like, hey, like owning a property, at least owning my home, is like square one in your trajectory.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha.
First home. Not only that, paying rent. I mean, if you look at the rents compared to, mortgage, especially, last year, a year before that, during the pandemic, I mean, interest rates were super low. it's like anybody that got in with the low interest rate. I mean, even if you look at it right now, the home prices haven't even dropped. All right, they're stable.
All right, folks, it's a non-realtor telling you this, so you don't just have to take my word for it. I mean, there's some areas where it's softened a little bit. I think some of it's around like the fixer style homes.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you're right. You're dead on, man. Like in my own neighborhood, I was running comps the other day, and it's like, dude, there's not that much on the market. There's probably 5 single family homes out of 3,000 homes on this little hillside I'm on in the North LA area, and it's just like, wow. And they're still going, and some of the recent sales have gone above asking, and I think it's because, dude, people want a place of belonging, you know. And don't you feel like I grew up renting? My mom, single mom, didn't own a home. Maybe like different but similar to your story in some ways, in the sense of like my mom never thought about owning a home in the U.S. initially, you know. And she was born here, but I always realized like my friends' families that were doing well, they own homes, they own property, right? So that there's something about that. And then, you know, the idea of inheritance, like setting up something now, like in your 30s and 40s for your legacy, you know, if you have kids one day or whatever it may be, you know?
Yeah, you can leverage it, the equity. I mean, California, it's just super expensive. It's not like other markets, soft markets, secondary markets, like, you know,
we've got
Austin,
our issues here, but
Utah, Denver.
Yeah.
But everybody wants to be in LA or the West Coast. I mean, look at the jobs. It's the 4th largest economy in the world. So it's like,
and we're talking 4th largest economy, like that's relative to other countries too.
Yeah. Worldwide.
So California could literally probably function as a country on its own if it wanted to.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like from an economic standpoint.
Yeah.
And if it were to do that, the US would take a serious hit. Like a lot of what we do here fuels the whole national economy, which is ironic because so much of the politics of the U.S. happens like completely across the other side of the country from California. I always thought that was weird, but so that was the early driver. What about when you actually started your search? So what was it? What year did you start your search in?
So I started my search. I mean, I've always been looking like on Redfin or Zillow on the internet and stuff like that, but like, you know, just kind of sifting through listings and just kind of staying abreast of the marketplace. It was either like a condo or a single family home. I mean, I didn't get too serious up until probably like maybe a year, maybe like when did I 2021, I believe.
Yeah, because we met in like February of 2021, I think, right? At one of my open houses.
Yeah.
And how many months prior to that did you start your search?
Actually, probably like 6 months, maybe 7 months, maybe a little bit longer. But like, I didn't start working with a real estate agent probably like until 6 months out.
Okay.
Before I met you.
Typical. Okay. Tell me a little bit about that experience. Like you were working with another real estate agent prior. How did you meet them? What was the experience? And then maybe a little bit about how we connected and like what I was able to do. I don't want to say for you, but with you, because it really is a team effort, you know?
Yeah, and I know that the marketplace is very saturated with would-be buyers and people just kind of looking, and very much saturated with a lot of real estate agents. Maybe they could be doing it part-time and stuff like that. But I met my real estate agent through Zillow, you know, just to inquire. But yeah, I mean, the experience was pretty bad. It because they don't know how to qualify who's serious or who isn't serious.
Sure.
You know, I had
you probably clicked on her profile. It's like probably a paid profile ad or something like
that. Yeah, Zillow
then
just connected me. Yeah, Zillow connected me, but they definitely dropped the ball in that regard because you know, obviously customer experience is everything. But I mean, obviously, you know, I understand the role and the function, and obviously, you know, the perspective of a real estate agent, especially meeting somebody that they don't know.
Yeah,
you want to make sure that that person is serious, right?
Correct.
So it's like they want to get a higher return on investment based on the conversion rate on the time that they spend with you. But even then, when they figure out that you're serious and you have your loan approval, and you meet them, you speak to them, they probably still won't take you serious, man. So I mean, I'm in sales, man, and it's like, hey, man, I don't judge anybody. Let's work together, man. I'm gonna work my hardest for you.
But you can tell if somebody's dialed in or not, though.
Oh, absolutely, man, absolutely.
So this person basically contacted you, you know, through your clicking on the Zillow link.
Yeah.
You know, you probably saw a couple properties with them, probably weren't proactive in communication.
Yeah.
And then I'll take it from here real quick if you're okay with that.
Yeah, go for it.
So I have a listing that went on the market in Eagle Rock in February of 2021, so a year ago. And I love this listing. My sellers were great. And so I think this was the second open house I did. I'm like getting my sign set up, and all of a sudden I see this really cool Jeep, like off-roading setup Jeep, like parked, you know? And like as soon as I open the door, like for people to come in, it was like, boom, Toan pops out and he's like, hey man, are you a listing agent? Like you were like, I could tell you were like really intense and like really ready to make something happen. It was a kind of just a vibe I got. And I was like, yeah, man. And then it's funny because we'll do a watch check here. I got my Rolex day date on. This is probably my prized watch. You've got your
nice.
your Submariner, blue Submariner.
Yep. Love
So Rolex. But I noticed your watch right away. I think you're wearing a Breitling Super Ocean.
Yep.
So for some of you out there, you can think this is hilarious, like we're having a watch talk. But I always like to tell people, for men, like your watch and your shoes, and it doesn't have to be a Rolex or something super expensive, but your watch and your shoes, your two main accoutrements, say a lot about you, right? In any setting. So I think you saw my watch. I was wearing a Daytona that day, I think.
Yeah.
And I think I knew you were a serious person. You knew I was a serious person. Yeah. And we just hit it off, man.
Get shit done, man.
Yeah, get shit done. And I could tell that you were ready and like you were kind of like exasperated because, excuse me, you kind of felt like your other realtor hadn't given you like the type of service you want. Like you're a ready buyer. You need somebody to make it happen. Like from the transaction standpoint, from the execution standpoint.
Time was the essence because I knew that interest rates were going to go up.
Literally, right before that, you got yours locked in.
Yeah, I knew that it was going to go up and that would be detrimental to my journey and what I wanted to do in the future because not only that, California real estate, especially in desirable markets, like I did comps, I looked at different areas. I was looking all over LA, right? And there's what's cool about LA is that there's a lot of small little pockets that people don't know about.
Absolutely.
But it's still super competitive. It's very, 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 very competitive. So, I mean, like it was like Woodland Hills. It was like, Hollywood Hills. I mean, if you get lucky, if you have the budget and you get lucky, maybe not, right? It was like Mount Washington. And like I was living in downtown, prior to me, buying the house, and I was living all over different. Like I lived in Marina Del Rey, I lived in Long Beach, I lived in downtown LA, and so I kind of knew like where things were. But then I also was looking at different pockets within the map of LA to see what's affordable, what's safe, what's like okay if I was going to stay there for like 2, 3, 4, 5 years and maybe upgrade somewhere else. Like the stability of the marketplace within that local marketplace.
For sure.
What's desirable. So I looked at all the different characteristics of those neighborhoods and I was going around and I was like, downtown is a buyer's market for sure. Regardless, whatever economic cycle that we're in, nobody wants to live in downtown.
No, man. It's a semi-war zone, dude. Yeah. And honestly, the condo market there is oversaturated. The foreign investors came in and they overbuilt the high rises, and they underestimated how much of a zombie like drug apocalypse it was going to turn into down there. Maybe we'll chat about that more later. But
I mean, downtown is fun. It's fun to live there, as a young single guy.
Sure.
It's just
there's great bars and stuff like that. At least pre-COVID for sure it was.
Yeah, it was popping.
Everybody thought it was going to be like a rocket ship, and then COVID. I think like a third of the restaurants down there closed and never reopened. So it's really tough, for a while.
Right.
And then just the homelessness and drug stuff is like exponentially proliferated.
Skid Row.
It's not just even contained to an area anymore. I mean, it's like it's bad. But yeah, man. So you had all this energy. I had all this energy. I was really excited. And what was awesome is I could tell you were serious because you were like, dude, I know the area. I know things are going above asking still. Yeah. I don't want to mess around. I want to put a shut it down offer to your sellers. Yeah. I'm going to work with you because you're going to do you're just like telling me, and I'm like, I got you, dog. I think literally that was on a Sunday, and I think Monday evening we had it in escrow. You gave my sellers a great offer over asking, so we didn't even play games with other buyers. Yeah. And you got your late rate locked in. I think literally by the time you closed your escrow, rates had jumped like a full percentage point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you would have waited, like that's what's insane is if you had waited like 2 more weeks, you would have got your payment would have been probably $1,500 more a month.
Yeah, it would have been a lot more, especially now. Like 1 year later too, it would be like $2,000 more.
Oh, dude, yeah, we're in the mid sixes now. You know,
close high. Yeah.
Some people are over 7%. So, and it's as a realtor, it's like you never want to pressure somebody. I never want anybody to feel like I'm forcing. But there is some instances where you're like, you got to pull the trigger, but hopefully I don't think you ever felt like, did you ever feel like I was pressuring you?
Nah, I was like, hurry up, man.
You the one telling you
get this done.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You're like, can I move in next week?
Yeah. I was cracking the whip on him.
You were, dude. We had a little sparring match too, didn't we, bro? Yeah, we did. But I love that. I love working with all types of people, but I love a client that knows what they want, serious person, you're decisive. And man, I got to congratulate you, bro, because
Thanks.
buying a single family home in Eagle Rock, in a prime part of Eagle Rock, you're like right on the edge of Mount Washington, Eagle Rock.
Yeah.
That's not an easy task, man. And
No, it was not easy. It was not easy at all.
let's so you had a positive client outcome, and I'll take that as a reason to celebrate. Thank you, guys. Thank you. We appreciate you, audience. It makes me happy to hear that, my man. And I always tell people too, the thing I love about real estate, it is a sales job, but it's also really like trusted advisor, client service role. I think for me, for people that want to be in it professionally in a long-term sense,
Mm-hmm.
And so what I value the most is honestly the clients that like I've built friendships with, like that means the most to me. I know you'll send people my way, which is great, but that you can be on my podcast, we can meet for lunch. I can learn from you, because if I'm just insulated in my real estate brokering world and my mortgage world, but lose touch with like past clients and their experiences, I'm losing, not just professionally, but I'm losing personally, So to me, real estate or any work we do, it's a win-win when you can actually build meaningful relationships beyond the business aspect of it,
Yeah.
So that said, a lot of what probably made it happen for you is you were part of the startup tech world for what, about 7 years?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been in tech sales for the last 15 years, but yeah, I had a real good run, a real good run.
We like those.
Yeah. A real good run. That's sales, baby.
He had a good run. I love it.
But no, it was awesome. If you work hard and you stay focused and you don't let distractions, kind of pull you one way or the other. That's why I feel like, it's hard to find success because something's pulling you one way and the other's pulling you the other way. And it's really hard to stay focused on what you're good at. So it's like, the last, my prior stint, it was just like, it was a really great run because I was the first US based employee, actually the first US sales employee, just building out the GTM for a software company that was based out of India.
So let me get this straight. I gotta pause you right there.
Yeah.
Because you're saying you're getting pulled different directions, and a lot of people don't even know what they're good at, first of all. And then when opportunities present it, they don't have the initiative to pull the trigger and take a risk on themselves. So this is what a lot of people don't understand. They hear about people in the startup world, and then big payouts, and your shares get vested, and you have a big IPO and all that. But they see the billionaires and the millionaires from the executives, they're the owners, they get the big parachutes, right?
Right.
But what they don't realize is a lot of those companies start with 1, 2, 3, 5, maybe 10 people that before anything is proven, sometimes walk away from already stable jobs and say, all right, I'm going to hop on board because I believe in this horse. I believe in this vision. And a lot of times you're not even paid a competitive salary usually to start, right? You're given stock options, but there's no guarantee those turn into anything.
Yeah. Most of the time they won't turn into anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So for a long time, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of time in the startup world, you're working for an uncompetitive salary in a lot of cases, doing sometimes double, triple the work you'd be doing. Because again, you're wearing a lot of hats, even though you're a sales VP or whatever you may be.
Yeah.
And it's at the end of the day, if you make it happen and the company gets sold or has an IPO, that's where the payoff is. But it can take 7, 10 years to get there with no guarantee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that kind of your story? What happened with the last company you were at?
Yes, that's pretty much. But it's like going back to like, watching the marketplace, like when I was my journey of growing up and looking at real estate and looking at the vision of what it could be for myself, right? That was always a goal. So then when in college, after college, I graduated and then got into sales, and then just being fortunate enough to be in Silicon Valley, seeing the marketplace, right? Seeing the competitive landscape, seeing the disruption, even though I didn't have that opportunity in front of me, it's like my experience of being there at the right time at the right place, but also understanding the marketplace and doing my due diligence, and then, getting lucky, I guess you would say. But then knowing how to identify an opportunity for myself to get lucky,
capitalize on that luck.
Yeah, right. So it's like you may not think that you have an opportunity in front of you, even though you're not. But you still have to be present and like kind of understand the marketplace. It's just like sales. Like I might lose a sale, but it's still like it doesn't mean that I haven't learned anything. I'm still preparing
100%.
for something to come up in the future for me to capitalize on.
100%.
And so it's like when I saw that opportunity, I was interviewing for some big corporations in San Francisco. I saw the opportunity. I was like, I got something right here. There's something right here, which most people don't know how to identify. Most people ran away from that, even though I took a pay cut.
Yeah, especially if you have one of those major established companies saying, "Hey, we'll give you $250, $350 a year guaranteed W-2 salary." You know, not as many stock options to start because now they're guaranteed. But then you're like, "Hey, maybe you're getting like a third of that."
Yeah.
But we're going to give you like 30,000 shares. They're worth nothing now, but they may be worth $100 a share one day. You know,
right? I mean, I saw the upside. I saw what it could be. But then it's like you put the feelers out. It's just like me meeting you, right?
Yeah.
I understood like, all right, this is my guy. When the light clicks, the light clicks. Yeah. It's like all those. There's a lot of things that you can't quantitatively measure, but you know, if you're good at poker or if you're good at sales, you have that intuition, that gut feeling. Just follow it. You know what I mean?
Correct. You know, it's funny. So funny to say that. So we're talking about startup world. You know, my real estate world. Realtors they. You know, you do mailers, you do door knocking. I mean, there's a lot of old school methods. People are now, of course, internet advertising and all the different websites, social media, of course, having a podcast. All that plays in. My favorite thing is doing open houses, even if it's not on my listing, because I look at it as that's my office in the neighborhood and the light's on, baby. And so people drive by and they might be a neighbor. But I'm like, I love when people come in, I can have a conversation with them. And again, not to toot my own horn, but like I have this like urgency inside of me that like, I know I will do the absolute best job for you. Part of it is because I'm also a lender. So I understand the whole process, right? And that's the number one thing is being a successful salesperson is obviously understanding how to convert your job and being educated in what you're offering, but understanding all the externals as well. Understanding the people you interact with, all their hopes, fears, dreams, questions, anxieties, and all that, right?
Yeah.
And being able to communicate that like, and hopefully this is what I did with you is like, hey, I'm going to be your trusted advisor. I'm gonna make sure that this gets done for you and you have a good experience. Like not a good, like a great experience, right? Like how you feel. Because any old person may be able to get a property closed for you eventually. But dude, if you're having turbulence every day along the way, that kind of sucks, right?
No, I think you're a master at what you do because I'm a master at what I do within business software.
Sure.
So I think you understand the customer journey from the beginning all the way to the end till post. Like you understand that. You understand the landmines. You understand, where you're going to have difficulty, working with other people like the lenders or the getting a mortgage.
I think you were even pre-approved with another like internet bank. And I was just like, and I didn't pressure him like, hey dude, I do loans. I can get the same rate or better. And I'm going to give you a better experience. Cause a lot of people I tell them, look, the reason I actually got into mortgages after I was already a licensed broker was because I'd have clients be like, I hate my lender, or because they used US Bank and they have to call Kansas office for whatever. And the lady in Kansas call center has no clue about LA real estate, Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize how vital the financing is everything, right? The bank funding and that experience. So doing both, I can control the whole client experience, which I think for me is a unique, it's a thing that separates me from just, any old realtor.
It's very, very smart of you to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. The customer experience was wonderful. It was, you saved me. You probably saved us a lot of time, man. Just by getting the mortgage done and all that, all the documentation. It was full documentation.
And coming back to luck, right? Is like, I put a listing on in February and it was like luck that it was the right time you were looking. But then I seized an opportunity. You seized an opportunity because you realize, okay, this is my horse. He's going to get me close. He's going to get me,
make the experience great, but also do it fast and just get me in the house right away so I can just move on with my life.
Exactly. I'm big on how people feel, in the process. I'm sensitive to that, a lot of what I do is psychology essentially too, because I do transactions all the time. It can be a little bit of like, just kind of like, nothing's a big deal, but for every individual client, it's the biggest deal decision they'll probably ever make. A lot of them,
absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure.
So startup world. So you're at this company 7 years. It ended up being a grand slam for you.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
Yeah. So I started at Series B. The company had roughly about 150 employees. Most of them were all in India. Most of them were engineers.
Okay.
Just one salesperson, which was me. I was working with the president, the chief marketing officer, the VP of business development. We were in a small 400 square foot office in San Francisco, right off of California Street. And, I just got busy, just got to work. You work 12-hour days, man, and if you want to live your dream, you got to put some skin in the game. You got to believe. You got to have faith. You got to have inspiration. You got to have hustle. So it was just execution after that, and never looked back. But it started from Series B. The company was valued at roughly $100 million, and then we went IPO that year in 2021, valued at over $10 billion. I mean, obviously the turbulence in the stock market now,
Sure.
I mean, like in the last 10 years,
the shares you sold from from your vesting, are they worth less now than when you sold them?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
you got.
I mean, I sold most.
Sold most
obviously
of it,
because cash is king right now, right?
Yeah.
So it's like I already knew like valuations.
Yeah.
Like in the last 10 years, tech and it was just a bubble. If you look at
a rocket
WeWork,
ship.
WeWork, they didn't even have an IPO, but.
And all the cheap venture capital money that was coming in,
0% interest,
and coming into SVP, Silicon Valley Bank. I don't know if your former company was part of that.
It was, but they had minimal exposure to it after they went public.
That's good.
Yeah.
But I mean, that dovetails nicely into the current environment we're in, where it's like, SVB was a 40-year-old regional bank, right? But
they were killing it.
They were killing it, but they had a vulnerability in that overall majority of their client base were these startups, right? So they were, let's just say unstable companies that, startups fold all the time, right? Because startups are dependent on funding rounds and venture capital getting, this is Shark Tank basically, right? Getting capital injected into them. And once that spigot turned off in early 2022, from what I've researched, it was like, now they were not bringing in deposits from venture investors. Now they're having to go to their savings at SVP and withdraw more. So SVB got used to all this venture money coming in through their small startup clients. That shut off, and now the clients were like, "Hey, we need to make withdrawals because we got to cover payroll." And SVB's like, "Oh shit, we got like $100 billion of it put in treasuries that are now worth 30% less.
Right.
What do we do? Okay, we'll liquidate those, and now we'll just try to sell a third of the company.
Take a loss."
And then people were like, "What?" Like, So it's just again diversification. They weren't diversified. They had a very concentrated client base, right, industry wise, right. And then they didn't diversify their investment. I mean, I don't know how they didn't believe that the Federal Reserve would start raising rates eventually. You know what I mean? You can't keep rates at artificially at zero forever.
Yeah, I mean they were negligent, man, with basically their operations, and I mean they should have known. I read an article in the Wall Street Journal, them stating that. They're blaming it with the work from home culture. We didn't have anybody, to kind of pay attention to the marketplace and where the money was.
Yeah.
I was like, that's bullshit, man.
Well, and yeah, exactly. And the crazy thing is, and this is what really bugs me, man, is that, I mean, I'm all about personal responsibility, but it seems like anytime a large sector fails, like a bank or investment bank, whatever, Lehman Brothers back in 2008 and the mortgages, it's like, government, you got to bail us out because the whole economy is going to fall down if you don't. And I understand, like, rationally speaking, yes, there's some aspects to that. Like, you don't want a larger run you don't want a systemic crisis to arise from a local thing that could be treated locally, right? But at the same time, like, it kind of sucks because, there's individual people that go bankrupt over medical debt, over credit card stuff or whatever, that wasn't just, for frivolous spending, but it was like literally just to survive. Yeah. And there's nobody coming to bail them out. It's just, it's such an unequal
Main Street
economy, right? It's like, it's like any of these big players, if they go casino mode and, the house calls for their money, it's like, hey, you gotta like bail us out or else even bigger collateral damage. It's like it's almost like there's no option but to bail them out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Every time. And then I think it encourages worse behavior because then they get so big, they realize, hey, if it really hits the fan, the government's going to have to step in and do something.
Well, that's also the other thing too. Like, even if they tried to, but the thing is, if they tried to bail out Main Street, right? Like, who's going to distribute the money? It's the banks and the financial markets. They're going to make a killing off of that.
During COVID, that was the crazy thing.
Right, exactly.
Is those trillions of dollars, even the PPP loans, it was crazy because there was no restrictions on the side. Like, so say your Bank of Toan, right? And the government goes, hey, we need you to lend out to small businesses, this PPP loan. And we're going to give you 10 billion to yours. All you banks going to get 10 billion. And there's, you don't have to have a certain number of loans. Well, then you're going to be like, okay, and we're going to make 2.5%, 3%, whatever they're going to make on it, like $2 billion for lending out 10 billion or whatever crazy money they made. you're just going to lend it out in big tranches to people. You're not going to give it to little mom and pops because that's more work. You're going to get paid the same to do it, whether you lend it to 10,000 people or 10 people, you know? So it blows my mind how much like you said, it feels like the money always comes back to the bank. Like they always get a slice of the pie, you know?
Yeah. And that's why I think that's one reason why like cryptocurrency is possibly an attractive, you know, platform or asset to exchange. But who the hell knows Bitcoin just went up quite a bit, man, like 20, 30, 40%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like 2 weeks ago, it was like 21,000 per coin. And now it's like 28,000.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was up around 60 something, I think, at its peak, right?
Yeah.
It's had some drop offs and so we'll see what it is long term, you know?
Yeah.
I think the nice thing is that like it's decentralized, but there's a record, but that's also the scary thing. The other thing that scares me about cryptocurrency and even Bitcoin is that like at any point in time, governments can just shut it down. You know what I mean? Like the US can like people don't get it twisted. Like at any point in time, the government can come in and say, we're having our own digital currency. All other digital currencies are banned. Like they could choose to do that, you know.
The US dollar is already a digital currency, man.
It really is, right?
Yeah.
There's a video I posted on my Instagram feed from Jerome Powell, and this guy's asking like, so like when you issue $6 trillion in debt or whatever, where's that money come from? He's like, well, some of it we print, but a lot of it is just digitally. Yeah. And like, you know, we don't literally print $6 trillion. We wire digital money, and then as we need to print money, we do, you know, for the system, but it's digital, you know.
Yeah.
And what a lot of people don't realize is we really have a debt monetary system here. So like, people are like, we got to pay down the debt. It's like, well, I mean, kind of, but we're not on the gold standard anymore. So as long as the U.S. is the reserve currency, and as long as our debt doesn't really exceed our overall GDP, then you can kind of still issue debt. Like it's kind of like a self-perpetuating.
Just print, baby.
I mean, you know, it's always kind of like ebb and flow of combination of the two, you know.
Yeah.
But it's so complicated. I mean, people don't know. I feel bad because people don't really know. It's difficult. I'm not 100% clear on all of it, but like where their money comes from, how it's derived. You know, I mean, the reality is if a bank takes in $100, they're only required to keep $10 of your $100 deposit on hand.
Right.
Because the assumption is not everybody's going to withdraw all their, you know, all their money.
I think that's one reason why Silicon Valley Bank failed, because everyone was rushing in because they were scared.
Exactly. Everybody's rushing in because they're like, oh crap, you know, like these guys are trying to sell off a third of the company to raise money. Like what's going on, you know?
It's like a mob mentality.
Yeah. And then it's like, well, I'm going to get in. And the worry was like, you know, I mean, it even crossed my mind. I'm like, should I go to Wells Fargo tomorrow, honey? And like, you know, cash out our accounts. They'd probably tell me they couldn't even, you know, cash it all out, you know?
Yeah.
There's actually a time during COVID where I tried to go get like $5,000 cash out of my credit union. And they're like, sorry, we can only do 2,500. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, my account has like way more than that in there. $5,000. I'm like, $5,000's a lot of money, but it's not like,
no, it's like not over 10 grand. Then they have to like, you know.
Yeah, over 10 grand. But I was like, $5,000 really? I'm like, I have to like give you notification. I'm like, if it was 10, 15, weird. 20, 25, 30 grand cash, I understand that's not an everyday occurrence. You know, maybe you need a few day notice, you know? But yeah. And a lot of it was because I think there was a certain period during COVID where people were like worried about the bank. So they went into that, you know? So kind of weird though. Kind of weird to think that like, if you have like 50 to 100 grand or more in an account, good luck withdrawing it all at once. If you want to withdraw it, you're going to have to do like 5-10 grand at a time. If you want cash, you know? Yeah. So and that's because it's more of a digital nature, our currency.
Or you're going to have to wait a couple days or a week or something like that.
Or making
the cash.
Well, that's what he told me. I was like, what do you do with like big business? I was like, well, if people want like 100 grand cash, usually it takes 2 to 4 weeks and we have to do an order form. And we literally order that from our main vaults to be delivered, you know? I'm like, oh, that makes sense. They don't want to have too much cash on hand in the bank, you know?
Yeah, and I don't like carrying a lot of cash anyways, man. Like it's a liability.
100%, especially these days in LA. Let's talk about that, man. You gotta be these days. I mean, you're fine here in my neighborhood, right? Yeah. And I wear my watches freely. I mean, I don't really worry too much. You know, I'm smart about where I go and usually have a long sleeve on, but man, like in LA, you gotta really be careful because there's people out there scoping watches, bags, cars, whatever. You know, it's I don't know what you've seen, but I feel like every day on social media, the news, there's some sort of carjacking, robbery. It feels like it's more than it's ever been.
I mean, you got to be self-aware for sure. Like, you know, you got to know where you're going and don't be a victim, you know, but it's like, I'm not too worried, you know, about crime. I guess that's why I was living in downtown LA. I was like going out at night by myself, you know, but I think if you're putting yourself out there, you're unaware, and you're kind of making yourself a victim. They'll definitely be targeting you.
Yeah. Everything I've heard is like how you walk, how you carry yourself. And if you actually look like you're paying attention to what's going on, dictates a lot of who they choose. Now, unfortunately for us, there are people out there that will just sit in certain areas and neighborhoods and look for people wearing popular luxury watches, and they, Rolex or Patek.
I'm not that rich yet.
No, but they notice the watch though. You know what I mean? They're looking just for the watch. So you got to be careful. I think it was like Woodland Hills. There's a cheesecake factory. Like 6 months or a year ago, there's a guy like literally pulled into the valet. This is like over by Calabasas. Like this is kind of hidden hills where like Drake and the Kardashians all of them. Guy pulls in a like Aston Martin or one of these high end vehicles. Gets out. This is the valet line. It's a major shopping center, major shopping mall, Cheesecake Factory. Gets out of the valet. His wife has a high-end Rolex on. He has a high-end Rolex on. As the story goes, like these guys come up in a car, front and back, boxing him in. As soon as he steps out, this is in the valet line. Gunpoint, takes his watch, takes her watch, jumps in the car, takes the car, and takes off. Like that's easy. That's just wild to me.
That's easy.
But they probably followed him from their house or something like that. You know, they're probably just sitting in a neighborhood that's of wealth. Followed them, you know, or knew that they were going to eat or whatever it may be, you know, and pretty wild times, man.
Yeah, it's like predator and prey. It's like, unfortunately, that's what it is, man. That's what it is.
It's the world we live in, just the way it is, huh?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
That's the world we live in. I'm just messing with my new sound effects. Folks, I just realized my soundboard has pre-programmed sound effects, and Toan showed me how to get it going. So thanks, buddy. I'm appreciative of that.
Had to turn the volume up.
I know. It's so technical.
Yeah, it's a lot of buttons.
It really is, even though they try to simplify it as much as they can. So Toan, what else, anything else you want to chat about today? I mean, I have a couple more things in my head that I'd love to just kind of kick around with you, but is there anything that you have for me, my friend?
I think, ask away, man. I'm good.
Awesome. So podcast, the Toan Dang podcast, or as I like to call it, the Dang podcast, that Dang podcast. Are you, I know you got guns and blazing. Are you now kind of like, realistically, like I tell people about Terra Firma. This is something fun for me. I'll use it for marketing for my business. I want to have conversations with friends and interesting people. If you want to do anything, you got to start somewhere, right? So I don't have any grand visions to monetize this or make it something, but you never know. If you don't start, you never know, right? So for me, it's like a hobby plus right now. You know, for you, I think it's probably similar.
Yeah, I think it's like a form of expression. I mean, it's nothing, nothing serious that I would consider. I mean, obviously, I like kind of just expressing and having conversations just like you. But I mean, running a podcast is extremely difficult for sure. It takes a lot of time.
I know. I was like the production techie, right? I was like, doing all that. And I'm a total amateur when it comes to those things. So luckily they started making these things like, idiot proof for the most part. So,
but I also think it's like important for I guess what everybody's saying, like with the rise of social media and all the different platforms to get exposure, it's like everybody has a podcast, everybody has like something going on within social media. And I think right now it's like it is super important for people to get out their message, whatever they feel that is important, because not too many, like we live in an age where it's like, it's everybody has a voice. And I think sometimes there could be like different narratives, like whatever you see on social media, from what I found as far as like the last, like scanning through the internet, and like there's obviously a lot of fake news and a lot of like outlandish stuff that's happening.
Yep.
that tries to grab your attention. But I think what is important for like regular people like you and I to kind of have a discussion and give people this exposure is that, yes, I mean, there's just regular people out there talking about real things. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. So it's perfect segue. I promise that we didn't pre-screen this at all. There's zero script, ladies and gentlemen. So if there's even one of you still with us, we're honored. We're blessed. Hopefully you're enjoying this. Man, so you and I both, and we never plan this. You and I both have posted on our social media. And let me rewind a little bit. In my experience, there's people that like, let me rewind a little bit more. You familiar with Jordan Peterson?
Yeah.
Okay. I love something that he said recently, and he said, and I'm going to repeat this probably like every time on my podcast because I love it. He said, we're at a point in society, and I think he's talking mostly Western society, where people have to realize we have to continue thinking. And in order to think,
Yeah.
we have to be able to write and speak. And if we're going to write and we're going to speak, we have to be willing to risk offending other people
Right.
and risk being offended.
Yep.
And if we can't risk offending people or being offended, we'll cease to think, because
Yes.
the very process of thinking is me being comfortable enough with you, Toan, to throw something out there that I'm thinking or feeling or experiencing, and risk that maybe intentionally, maybe unintentionally, it offends you, but we're not going to kill each other.
Yeah.
And then your response, it might offend me, but that's okay. It's okay to have offensive conversation,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
We've become so soft in our society. And then maybe in you responding back to something that I say it's offensive, I hear something and see something and feel something that I didn't before, and then I learn and grow, and I change the way I say something, or I change my thinking, right? Like, how can any of us, and I think people are so shy to say anything of substance these days because they're afraid of being canceled, right? And I repeatedly tell people, like, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I really don't care about party politics. I think a lot of it is just so far gone with, it's a wash with money. And whenever you follow the money trail, it really has nothing to do with ideas or solutions. It's really a fundraising gig is what it is, right? Our politicians are essentially perpetual fundraisers for the Democratic and Republican Party. Solutions are bad for fundraising is what I say, right? Very few of them are oriented in solutions, because if they solve things, what else are they going to get people outraged about?
Right.
Right.
It's like an industrial complex. Like like these narratives that are out there that they're pushing, you got to think about, like, people, like, just going back to what you were saying in the beginning of your comment with Jordan Peterson, right? You do have to risk, in order to critically think, you have to risk of offending other people. And I think people have gotten so lazy.
Yeah.
They've gotten so lazy, man.
Well,
they're not even
they're
thinking.
tribal. It's easier just to be like, okay, am I team Democrat, team
Yeah.
left, or am I team right? And so then they just let those sides tell them what to think, right?
Yeah.
And so then when you say something critical that it's like, I don't know which box, which tribe that fits in, now I'm angry, right? It's like, I generally identify as a classical liberal. So like Kant, Thomas Paine, John Locke, like kind of that philosophical outlet, right? Freedom and liberty, but also like an understanding of the collective, right? That like, to have a country, you have to have a strong collective, but you need to have freedom and liberty within that, right? And so it's kind of like I start with from the whole in rather than the individual out. I see both ways of doing things, but what really bothers me is, like, I'll tell people that, but I'm a strong believer in the Second Amendment. I'm a strong believer in gun rights. Now, I don't worship my guns. I believe we need to have conversations about guns. I believe in some cases there's some sensible regulations that we could explore and that should be talked about regardless of partisanship to solve some of the things that ail our society. The hard part is responsible citizen gun owners are, for the most part, not the ones causing a lot of these gun-related crimes, right? A lot of it is mentally ill-related, right? Or young kids getting them legally or illegally. Or at the end of the day, most people that are criminals or in the criminal world trajectory of committing crimes, it doesn't matter to them if the gun's legal or illegal. I mean,
They're still going to get it.
they can 3D print them if they really want to, their house, right? So, and again, if they're already on a criminal trajectory, they're not thinking, oh, I don't have a concealed carry permit, I guess I can't carry my gun. They don't care. So unfortunately, a lot of the gun laws that come out tend to only penalize in practice responsible gun owners.
Yeah.
Right. And like, people say like, oh, well, when the country was founded, they only had muskets, so I agree with your right to own a musket, okay. And they make the point like, okay, well, where do we draw the line on what you can or can't own? Like, should you be able to have an AR-15? If you can have that, well, why stop there? Can you have a bazooka? If you can afford to buy a bazooka, should you be able to have one? Because it's just bare arms, So there's complexities there, right? Like, but at the end of the day, like, I think, that it's sad that we can't even have just an honest like conversation and even acknowledge the complexities of a lot of these issues. Usually each side just kind of has their pat kind of storybook answer, and it's like end of discussion, and then everybody's kind of looking to see like, okay, what side are they on? And then, okay, I'm not your friend, or I'm going to reject you because you don't fit my rubric, right?
My tribe.
Yeah. Or like even the gender stuff, bro, you were bold in putting that stuff on there. It's like, dude, it's like, look, the overwhelming majority of biological history is there's male and female, right? How we express ourselves as men and women in society, that's obviously been there's elasticity to that, right? Like I'm a very different man than my great grandfather was because time and context and society dictates a lot of the things that, if I was born in the 1850s, I'd probably drink gin in a saloon and, have a long handlebar mustache and probably carry a pistol on my hip. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't because it's 2023, you know? But again, it's all on a spectrum at the end of the day. But here's the thing where it throws me off, and I think you posted it, it's like, we're at a place where now it's like people, there's people out there, there's a lot of people out there actually surprisingly that think like gender is something that you feel and make up, and like, and there's no limit or bounds. So like there's unlimited pronouns because it's literally whatever I want it to be. And you need to, and not only that, like I'm okay with like, if you feel a certain way, you have the right to feel how you feel. You don't have the right to dictate to everybody else how they feel about the way you feel.
Or how you think.
Or how you think. Yeah. Or, and the other thing is this, like if somebody's trans, that's fine. Like you can feel however you want to be, identify however you want to identify. But what you don't get to do is demand that everybody celebrates that. Like I don't like, we used to be about tolerance, you know, like we want to tolerate each other. And I think tolerance is at the best is its modern ideology was like, we're agreeing that we're going to have differences and we're not going to kill each other over them. Right. But it doesn't mean that I have to like wholesale adopt, you know, that your whole ideology. And a lot of it is when they turn it on kids, right? Where it's like, you know, 5th and 6th graders, like being taught like, oh, like you're not certain about your gender. Like your mom and dad, the doctor told you were a boy when you were born, but that was imposed upon you.
Yeah, they're definitely overstepping for sure.
You know,
I mean,
and it's constant.
Woke culture is a religion. It's like they're pushing.
It's a religion.
It's like they're pushing it onto you. Like there should be separation between obviously state and religion, right? It's like, but they're like with this culture that we're in today, it's like they're pushing onto you, and then they're gonna label you. You're a racist or you're homophobic.
Oh, absolutely. That's how they shut you down.
Yeah,
that's how they shut you down. And it's, if you ask a question, like if you don't even do what I just did right there and make comments, but you just ask a question like, hey, like, is it odd to you that like 5 years ago none of this was normal, and all of a sudden it's supposed to be normal, and like, you know, you're saying that there's like, you know, non-genders, multiple pronoun, like all these things, like that's not weird to you. You're a transphobe if you say that, right? Because you're questioning somebody. And for me, it goes back to, because I study philosophy in my master's program, is like, you know, there's the modern philosophers like Immanuel Kant, the Enlightenment, reason, the idea that, you know, prior to these German philosophers, there was a lot of, basically the world was a history of religious wars, essentially. Yeah. People appealed to their faith, their feelings, their tribe. Is that the way I say it? And so you have a world history that's littered with religious-based wars. We still have some of that, but the way the world moved forward, this is oversimplification, but it works, is Kant and Descartes before him, and Francis Bacon, they all in their own way said, no, we're going to appeal to reason. We're going to appeal to enlightenment. We're going to step out of our feelings. We're going to observe observable reality, and we're going to make factual judgments based on observations over time. And if the observations change, we're going to be willing to change our understanding, because it's the observational facts that dictate reality, not an individual's feelings or faith or tribe, right? And that was a good thing, because there was this like, we can agree this is a table, right? Right? We can agree if you have a penis, you're a man. Doesn't mean that you know, shoot guns, drink beer, and drive a 4x4 necessarily. You know what I mean? But that was an immutable fact, right? Based in the real world. And what happened is, like in the 60s, a lot of French philosophers like Jacques Derrida, Michael Foucault, some people say like Michel Foucault, I say Michael Foucault, they started critiquing the modernist rational view and started getting to the notion that like that was a hegemonic, like it was like a totalitarian, like oppressive, like oppressor and oppressed is what they started getting to. So Foucault said like basically language was a way of controlling people, right? Education was a way of controlling people, because the more somebody got educated, the more you spoke English, or not English, but a language correctly, the more you could hold over or oppress other people, right? Whereas like the modernists would try to say, well, no, everybody should aspire to like learn how to speak and write and think better, and then they can all improve their life, right? And so I think that's like the philosophical underpinning, like postmodernity, which is where we are now. We might even be postmodernity, where it's like everything is relative, everything's based on my feelings. I think with the whole gender thing, where we went wrong is they've made gender a feeling, right? It's a gender identity, right? And so for me, it's like, hey, at the end of the day, like how you feel is how you feel. It might be your gender feelings, but your identity is based on biology, essentially. Like, I mean, you don't have to like it, but that's just facts, you know? And now you might have dysphoria, you might feel differently, you might feel disconnected. And I can sympathize with that in the sense of I can't relate, but I can imagine how difficult that would be, right? But like you don't get to change and demand that everybody else change the whole vocabulary and suspend rational thought about the binary that literally exists for like the majority of human beings, in the sense that like, there's probably less than, my research shows there's like less than 1% of what they call an ambiguous gender or ambiguous sex, and that might be intersexed or whatever. But even most of those over time resolve, which is what's crazy to me, these like 12 and 13-year-olds that are getting like gender reassignment surgery. It's like, dude, you haven't even barely gone through puberty.
Yeah, they don't know. They don't know who they are. They don't even have an identity. But that's
right.
That's like the
You're
thing.
12, dude.
Like everybody goes through that, man. Growing up,
part of growing up was awkward. Part of it was being awkward.
Yeah, but also it was like learning who you are and then accepting who you are and then understanding your strengths and your weaknesses. It's like, but even then, like a question for like this gender dysphoria stuff or gender affirming stuff is even if they were to change their sex, right? Or will they be happy or not? I mean, that's like a new study. Like
and there's a lot of people. New. There's a lot of people that are like now in their 20s that are like regretting it and trying to reverse it. And some of it's like irreversible damage. I
mean, it seems like they're just unhappy, or like they need to they just need to accept who they are. I mean, that's just. I mean, I'm not saying I don't know.
And then what you said on your podcast when you talked about this was follow the money. Like looking at like Vanderbilt University, they have a whole gender affirming care thing. These procedures and medications and this lifetime of treatment of gender affirming care is worth millions.
Yeah, billions of dollars.
And don't kid yourself.
Billions.
Unfortunately, a lot of medical professionals, God bless them, there's a lot of them I think that are good, that have the best of intentions, but they get sucked into this medical industrial complex. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
Like, you ever been to your doctor's office, you see a really hot young girl. I know it sounds bad these days. Don't me too me. Hot young girl, 20s, walk in with a briefcase, with a roller case and some materials. Who do you think she is? She's a pharmaceutical rep. She's coming in to say, hey, like, we'll send you and your family to Hawaii on us if you start prescribing our cholesterol medication or our erectile dysfunction medication to your patients over the other. Like that stuff goes on. A lot of people don't realize it.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's like capitalism. It's capitalism, you know. But in the 90s too, they had like gender transitioning care because it's really considered a pseudoscience,
right?
But for like homosexuals, but like people throughout the medical field and as well as the policymakers, they basically outlawed it. But they're doing it the reverse. But this time, very much a similar thing, but they're on reverse roles of actually making them into transgenders, right? But like it's a pseudoscience that there's no evidence that those people will be happy throughout their entire life,
right?
But then just looking at the way that our economy works and looking at how business works, it's like, yes, all these companies are going to get into it and they're going to promote it.
And a lot of these businesses, they make money by creating new needs.
Yes,
right.
No, totally.
And I think they feed on I think generally we live in a generally I think increasingly narcissistic world, like narcissism and depression. And like, I think a lot of this is like, and we live in a victim society, right? And then a lot of people, I used to work in higher education and I have a master's degree, bachelor's degree, from like 20 years ago, 15 years ago, but and a lot's changed. But I saw the beginning stages of this, my man. And it's like these humanities departments, sociology, like gender studies, Black liberation studies, like these things, right? That I think probably started out in a good place, but they kind of become these self-devolving, there's this famous philosopher, well, somewhat famous, he's noted now, Peter Boghossian. He was at Portland State University, and about 5 years ago, he and a math colleague were like, oh my gosh, the whole system of peer-reviewed journal. A lot of people, you don't know that a lot of people that are professors, faculty, the way they maintain tenure or get tenure is they have to publish. They say publish or perish, right? And so that's where all these like academic journals that are quote unquote peer-reviewed come in, right? So there's an incentive for them to get published a certain amount of time so that they maintain their status as faculty, right, and make money. And so they hypothesized that these journals, so many of them, especially in the humanities. So Peter Boghossian was at Portland State, and I forget his colleague, but was also at Portland State. Colleague was a math professor. Pete Boghossian was a philosophy professor. They surmised and hypothesized that most of these journals in sociology and the humanities and gender studies are full of shit, and that they could get anything published. You could Google it. Google Peter Boghossian, And basically they wrote like 6 or 7 papers, and some were really funny. It was like, like canine species penis envy among dog parks in the Bay Area and Portland or something like that, right? And it was like about how like dogs are envious of other owners, so that when they're in a dog park, they feel more inclined to want to give fellatio to, like it's like off the wall, like shit, right?
Yeah.
It got peer reviewed and published. That was like their first one, I think, and they were like, this is nuts. Let's see how many we can do. I think by the time I got to like their 5th or 6th, they got found out, and it was a big fiasco. And then like Peter Boghossian, it's like basically he exposed a lot of these departments as a fraud. So he only taught at Portland State, I think, for a few more years, and recently he basically like resigned because he's like, this is just, it's a cesspool. Like so many of the kids are brainwashed into like their own narrative, and they can't be challenged. Like it's like, oh, well, I think Aristotle was a racist, so I don't want to read him, professor, so I'm not going to read him. It's like, well, no, fuck you. You're 19. You don't know shit. Aristotle's been around for 2,000 plus years. We're going to read him. And if you don't like it, leave. But what's crazy, historically, people would side with the professor, right? He's the PhD. He's the adult in the room. But now these administrators on campuses, and there's so many of them, which is part of the reason the tuition's gone way up, by the way. We'll get into that maybe. They side with the students now. I don't know if you saw recently, Stanford Law had a federal judge that was appointed by Trump. Stanford, some group on Stanford Law's campus invited this guy to come speak. A bunch of undergraduates came and like shouted him down. The dean came in, even though Stanford has an anti-shout down, like you don't have to agree, you can protest outside, but you don't get to disrupt like an invited guest, even if you disagree vehemently with their presentation, right? Because again, that comes back to
they might not even be Stanford students.
They might not even be.
Yeah.
But that comes back to the heart of a university is the notion of a free exchange of ideas, many of which you may not like or may disagree with. And you know how you combat that? You present better ideas, more convincing ideas, right? And because again, if we're not able to have this free exchange, we can't think anymore. We can only have one way of looking at something, right?
Yeah.
And these young kids have been indoctrinated into this victimhood ideology so hardcore that they work themselves up in a lather to shout down people.
And they get violent too.
They get violent. Yeah.
I mean,
so get this. Guy's a federally appointed judge by Trump. That's probably why they're pissed off, I think. There's video of it online. You can YouTube it if you haven't seen it out there. And the dean comes in, you're thinking, okay, the dean's going to come in and restore her. And like, no, she starts questioning this judge, right? Like, do you think that your comments are really necessary? Like, basically, like you've caused trauma to these people. He's like, I have? I don't know any of them. Like, well, your ideas cause trauma. And he's like, my ideas? Which ideas? Like, it's like insane. It's like this the woke movement, like this notion that they kind of have coined the term that like words are violence.
No, then they get violent.
Yeah, and I'm like,
they have
no,
their own army. Man.
Words are not violent. Yeah. Violence is violence, right? Like if I say, hey, fuck you to somebody, you may not like that, but that's not violence. Now, if I punch you in the face while doing it, the punching in the face, that's violence, right? Now, if I treat you disrespectfully verbally, you may never want to associate with me again. So that's a real consequence of my verbal actions. But that's not violence. Like you feeling offended or you feeling insulted is not violence.
I think they say that is because they're escalating it to get violent.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I mean,
it justifies it.
Yeah, it justifies the violence to shut you down, to do anything possible in order to shut you down, whether that means to get physical or even to threaten you with physical harm.
Right.
I mean,
and then their justification is because they call you a racist, a bigot, a homophobe, whatever they can come up with, so that basically you're an idiot, and then therefore they're justified in shouting you down or getting violent.
Yes, that's it.
But I was mind blown that a place like Stanford University Law School can't even have look. I'm not a Trump fan, but like but like the guy's a federally appointed judge. Clearly, he's an educated man. Clearly, he's had a long career. He didn't look like a young guy. You can't listen to the guy, like, you know what I mean? So it's like it's getting out of control. I mean, I have a 3-year-old son, and I'm already thinking like, dude, I don't know. I mean, that's 15 years away, but I don't know. It'll be interesting to see like where I feel like he can go to school. Like, I mean, it's really wild, man.
Yeah, that's tough. That's very.
You've
tough
got at Berkeley, you've got this faculty. I should have her name. I'll do a little more research on here. But it was like a year ago. She sat in front of the Senate, the U.S. Senate. And Josh Hawley, one of the U.S. senators from Nebraska, not a big fan of his, right? They're all kind of clowns in their own right. But like, she's talking. She's a law professor at Berkeley. And like, she used the term like birthing person. And he goes, whoa, Professor so-and-so, by birthing person, you mean a woman, right? You should have seen the look on her face. The fact that he would say, because even if you're a transsexual who identifies as a man, you're born a woman. So if you're a transsexual man who has a kid, you're still a woman. You're biologically a woman, right? So like, he was just trying to clarify that, dude. She practically lost her mind, went on this smirk on her face, like he's the idiot in the room, and like, oh my god, I can't believe you're a like, you know, it was like, you're a Neanderthal. How could you hold that view that women are the only ones that? And her whole point was like, well, the person giving birth may not identify as a woman. Doesn't fucking matter, dude. You know, your biology is not based on your feelings, unfortunately. You know,
yeah,
or fortunately, how do you want to look at it? But I was just like, wow, that's where. For me, this really became a thing because we had a sitting professor on the law faculty at Berkeley sitting in front of a sitting Yale grad senator in the chamber, right? One of our highest chambers. And we one side doesn't think that it's only women that can give birth. Like that's just, I mean, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, if you would have said that, people thought you lost your mind. Like, that's so outlandish. Not even in a movie would they think to make up something so foolish.
Yeah, no, I mean it's getting outlandish for sure. I mean, it's
where does it stop?
I mean, I really try not to focus on the ridiculousness of where all that stuff is going. But
fair
like,
enough.
It's
but it's like out there. Like if it was just fringe, I'd be like, oh, it's just some crazies that like in this district believe that or whatever, you know. But dude, we're talking about sitting in the U.S. Senate on live television. You know what I mean? Like clearly there's a push to try to normalize this stuff. I feel like it's almost gaslighting though, the general public, you know?
I mean, if they want, like, just be polite, respectful. Like, I mean, obviously when you meet somebody in person, they're transgender and they want to be, they want to identify as a man. Obviously we're going to treat you like a, man, but like, you don't have to make me believe that you're, like
literally.
Yeah, literally you're, it is what it is. That's like science. I believe in science.
And that's the point.
Biology.
You are free to dress, change what you want to change, whatever. But no matter what you do, it does not change your biology. And it comes back to that. Now, like you said, if you had a transgender friend or I did and we went out and said, dude, that's fine, bro. I respect everybody's humanity, everybody's self ability to self-actualize, But I'll be honest with you, bro. I think honestly, it's a legitimate dysphoria that like this notion that like bringing out the dick saw and like doing something else is like step one for like a 12 or 13-year-old is insane to me. It's probably a more deeper psychiatric, health, chemical. There's probably a lot of things going on there. I'm not a medical professional, but there's probably a lot of other things that should be done before we get to like these more extreme alterations, but I feel like the alterations and the puberty blockers and all these, like we can start catching them before they, go through male puberty and we can block that. So to me, like that's just crazy stuff,
people could do whatever they want as an adult, but as a child, I mean, come on, man. You haven't fully developed your brain until you're like 26.
Yeah.
And could a child actually think, do they have the capacity to think 10 or 20 years ahead?
Correct.
And then if they're permanently mutilating their bodies or their natural functions, it's like, oh,
that's in my opinion, that's criminal. Like people that push that on them,
I mean, like the purpose of life is your bodily function, right? I think naturally people want to
at the end of the day,
babies, right? A legacy.
At the end of the day,
right?
It really is.
People are taking that for granted, man. They're totally taking that for granted.
Tuan, you're like a savant, bro. Like how are you like nailing all these segues, my man? Like you've been are you a mind reader?
No.
So you're talking about basic biology and like reproduction. And I don't know if you follow this at all, but you should. There's this guy I follow. His name's Peter Zeihan. He's like a political, economic, geopolitical analyst. One of the smartest guys I've ever heard. He's a really good speaker. He takes complicated subjects and breaks down. I don't know if you're aware of this, but China and Russia in the next decade face population collapse, meaning typically you want a pyramid for your society, for your age stratification, right? You want more young people on the base and fewer old people, right?
Yeah.
So the younger people support the older people, right? And you keep it that way. Well, both those countries have an inverted pyramid. They have far more older people and younger people. A lot of that's the one-child policy in China for so many decades. Mm-hmm. And then also the Chinese, surprise, surprise, are not really big on reporting things factually. you know, because there's so much pressure from the CCP to like present data a certain way. And I get that data can be skewed. So the estimates are that they've underestimated their population of 35 and under by over 100 million. And the leading professionals, in the Pete being one of them, are predicting that there's essentially no way, like they could even start having try to have 2 or 3 kids. There's no way they're going to do it in time before there's an economic collapse. And what he's predicting is that Mexico and Canada and the U.S. are going to be the best one. Like globalization is going to kind of come to an end. The Russian war is also part of what's going to make things difficult farming wise on a global level, and their own population collapse in Russia. And he even thinks that Putin's motives for going to Ukraine are motivated by the Russians being very aware of their own population collapse and imminent demise. And this is like his like Hail Mary, like trying to like commandeer Ukraine and whatever else he could to get more people, essentially. Which is his whole thing. His whole thing is like Ukrainians are really Russians, you know, historically in his worldview, and Ukrainians don't view themselves as Russians. So anyways, all that to say, man, it is wild to think about like population collapse. I mean, I have one child, like people are having fewer children, they're having them later. You don't think about that on like a macro level, but dude, we really do need like children. Like when we're in our 60s, 70s, and 80s, we need a base of young people that are going to be able to move things forward, you know?
Right.
And like you said, as people start to, and Pete Zion talks about, as populations start to urbanize, I won't say, he says basically, he's like, when you're rural and living in an agrarian setting, he's like, kids are an asset because you need more bodies to do more shit. When you move into an urban center, everybody's living close, kids move away from being an asset to becoming a major liability. Yeah. And he's like, upward the mobile people are not stupid. So they start having less kids because they become a huge cost, right? And so he's like, but the flip side is you also need kids because physically as you age as a society, there's just things you can't do mentally, physically, all that, you know?
Yeah.
So it's going to be, I don't know, man. I didn't think about any of that until I started following Pete Zion on YouTube and listening to his lectures. And it's just pretty wild to think about like how population and all that is, and how many things are we're so globally connected. That's all changing, man.
Yeah. There's 8 billion people on the planet now, but yeah, I mean, it's just like children, like that's going back to it, right? Your natural purpose in life is to reproduce. Even though we might be stuck in this mode of hustle and grind,
right?
You know, me and a man, all right, you know, before I kind of wanted to get more established and kind of wait to get married or even to have children, but like I can have children whenever, you know, I can wait a little longer.
For men, like probably even 60s and 70s, you can still, in theory, get a female pregnant.
Yeah, because as a man, I think you do want legacy. You do want to
absolutely.
You do want to have like somebody to kind of take care of, or to have a child.
I was scared out of my mind to have a kid, and I always thought, you know what, damn, kids are so expensive. Like literally what Pete's saying, you know. My wife and we have our son, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Right. Like now I'm like, dude, the expense doesn't matter at all. Like I'm just like. Because when I'm the one thing, dude, what's crazy is my mind flipped. Once my son was born, I became really scared of dying.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way I hadn't before, because I was like devastated by the thought that I could die while he's young and what that would mean for him, and then all I would miss out on. It's weird, bro. It changes you.
Yeah, right. But sometimes you need that change to keep going, man.
It changes you. And like now, when I take him to school every morning, I hug him, I kiss him, and I realize like, dude, I can't take this moment, like this basic act of like driving him to preschool and dropping him off is like this sacred moment every day that can easily be like taken for granted, but it might not happen tomorrow. Like there's a chance, it might be a small chance, but there's a chance it could not happen tomorrow. And it's like crazy when you think about that, you know?
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to have any more kids. We're in our 40s now, but yeah, bro, it's like, I tell people, I go, I don't think you'll regret having a child. Even though I was a little bit like suspect. My friends that have like 4 or 5 kids, God bless them. I don't know how they do it. It is a lot of like mental energy, not going to lie. But at the end of the day, man, when you're like 70 or 80, if God allows us to live that long, it's like to have your kid, like nothing else matters, bro.
Right,
you know?
Right.
Like your mom, I'm sure your mom, you guys did this Europe trip. You're like her pride and joy probably, you know? It's like,
I don't know about that, but
I think so.
Maybe one of them, but yeah. No, it's family. It's all about family. And then, going through life, it's just like you've done everything. You've got all the materials. You made all the money. What else is next, man? The ultimate gift is really life.
That's true. It is. And to share it and to leave your, like you said, your homes, your real estate, your investments it's like
Your
it's all
business.
about you move the ball forward, right, for the next generation, right? So, man, we've covered a lot of ground here. We'll see how this gets cut up, but dude, I enjoyed the chat, man, and it means a lot that you took time to come out here. And hopefully we'll do it again soon, man. Hopefully I'll have some people locally that want to come on maybe 3 or 4 times a year, and there's always going to be new current event stuff for us to yak about.
Always.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, we'll see how all the financial markets kind of turn out this year.
Yeah.
But I think we're probably going to be in it for a bit.
Just a bit. Maybe next time I have you on, bro, we'll be drinking some single malt scotch and
yeah, that sounds good.
Watching where the Dow's at. So, dude, thank you for coming on, man. Toan Dang. Love you, buddy. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Love you too. Thank you so much, Sam.
Take care.
All right. Take care, guys.